Norman Raymond Gellerman was born in December 1917 in St. Paul, Minnesota. His siblings remember him fondly.
He was a cut-up, I can remember that. The older ones talking about him, and he was a nut about cars.
I remember him playing with Judy, who would be the oldest daughter, Norman's oldest daughter.
He was fun and very lively.
When we were growing up, he was working at one of the bakeries in downtown St. Paul, and I know that helped feed us when I was a kid.
Like many young men of his generation, Norman entered military service during World War II.
I remember being at, when he was first leaving from Fort Snelling, I was being a little brat. I think it was because he was leaving that I was choosing to be a little brat. It was my role, it's my job.
Right around the time of his enlistment, Norman was also married.
I went down and married him when he was stationed in Mississippi. He was already in, and he joined the Air Force rather than the Army. He did not want to go in the Army. He went into the Air Force.
Norman served as a flight engineer on a B-24 aircraft, which was commanded by Lieutenant Frank McDonald. In this photo of the McDonald crew, Norman Gellerman is at far left, while Lieutenant McDonald sits at the steering wheel. In March of 1944, Norman Gellerman's family received the news that all war families dread.
I got the notice that he was missing in action on my birthday, the 26th of March.
I was out working in the farm, like a lot of kids were, and we got the letter.
Actually, I was with Virginia when she got the letter from the War Department saying that he was killed.
I received a cross that he always carried in his left-hand pocket of his shirt, and I got that back, and that was all burned.
I was born after he died. Actually, more than 3 months after he actually was killed.
He didn't even know he had a son.
He's always just been a name, and never really knew anything.
The government never told me much of anything. No.
When the war ended, the circumstances around Norman Gellerman's death remained a mystery. More than 50 years later, Norman's grandson, Kevin Gellerman, sought to uncover the facts. Kevin began his search with little more than some family folklore.
Well, when I was growing up, we heard stories or rumors about how my grandfather died. The story was that he had gone in and pulled out all or most of the crew and saved their lives. And that at some point in time, not knowing when, whether it was in the plane or later on, that was never really covered in the story, that he had somehow died. But we never knew how he had died. And really one of the things that I wanted to find out was whether or not these stories were true. I wanted to know the truth and find out the truth and share it with people.
While visiting Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia during April of 1999, Kevin gathered his first lead after asking a clerk for some information.
And I got a little sticky note, it was a purple sticky note, with just the basic information, his group number, his service number, what medals he got, and the day that he died. So from there, what I did is I started doing internet searches.
An internet search led Kevin to a historian for the 8th Army Air Force who suggested Kevin visit the National Archives for more answers. It was at the National Archives that Kevin learned his grandfather and the rest of the crew were members of a secret air unit called the Carpetbaggers.
I was able to find a couple books about the Carpetbaggers. One in particular was Ben Parnell's book, The Carpetbaggers, as well as Don Fairbanks's Once Around the Patch.
Unfortunately, due to a fire at the St. Louis National Archive in 1973, the complete records of Norman Gellerman and countless other veterans were destroyed. Kevin was seemingly out of leads until he received a special phone call on Christmas 2001.
What really turned everything around and actually opened the entire floodgates, it was Christmas Day, Christmas evening, and my sister-in-law, Janelle, had called me.
I came upon this website and just started digging through the layers of the website and found all this information about the Carpetbaggers. And so I used Kevin's grandfather's name and typed in Norman Gellerman and started to find information specifically about him. And the information I found told me that he had been shot down in an area quite near Abbeville, France. I just copied down as much of the information as I could off the internet and the name of the website.
And she told me this information, and for the next week, or the next day, I actually went and checked out the internet site, and I found a plethora of information.
With the help of webmaster Serge Beldan, Kevin quickly made contact with several figures who studied the carpetbagger's history. Among them was Dr. Jean-Pierre Ducellier, a retired French physician and historian. To Kevin's surprise, Dr. Ducellier told him of a memorial constructed in honor of Norman Gellerman. The memorial was located near the town of unravel, where Norman's plane had gone down. Dr. Ducellier invited Kevin to participate in an annual ceremony that takes place at the memorial. With much of his research now complete, Kevin waited and saved for nearly 2 years to attend the ceremony on the 60th anniversary of the event. 1 week before leaving for France, Kevin shared some of his feelings about the upcoming trip.
You know, this is a once-in-a-lifetime trip, and it's a culmination of years of research and you know, a very personal search for myself. I'm really going in to meet my grandfather for the very first time. And granted, he's passed away, but you know, there's never been anything, a grave or anything like that, or a person that I could relate to. And so it's kind of like I'm finally going to have that connection. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting.
On February 29, 2004, Kevin departed on what would be his first and possibly only voyage to Europe. Kevin was met in Paris by 2 traveling companions who would assist him with communications and logistics. At Amiens train station, Kevin and his friends were met by Dr. Ducellier and his wife, Jackie. Upon arriving in the Doullens region, Dr. Ducellier described the final moments of Norman Gellerman's tragic flight. The B-24 was traveling from the east and was flying over the city of Doullens at low altitude. As it passed over Doullens, the plane was detected by the occupying German army. This is the site of a former railway yard, where German cannons mounted on trains fired the shots that brought down the B-24. That evening, in the Ducellier's home in Luchot, Kevin presented the Ducelliers with a book about St. Paul, as well as some other souvenirs from Minnesota. Dr. Ducellier responded in kind by presenting signed copies of one of his books. The book, entitled The Aerial War in the North of France, is a remarkably thorough and well-researched volume. Notably for Kevin, it includes a chapter about the night that Norman Gellerman died. The following day, Dr. Ducellier took Kevin to the home of Jean Schmidt, a farmer who lives in unravel and works the land where Norman Gellerman's plane crashed. Since 1965, Mr. Schmidt has been unearthing pieces of the downed aircraft. Mr. Schmidt presented Kevin with several containers of fragments. The total weight of the pieces was over 15 pounds. In later correspondence, Mr. Schmidt wrote that it was an honor to present these aircraft remnants to the grandson of Norman Gellerman. It was a rather festive occasion as Mr. Schmidt presented Kevin with container after container of artifacts. The scholarly Dr. Ducellier savored examining the pieces as much as Kevin did. Mr. Schmidt made sure to point out a couple of his favorite fragments.
Ça c'est Chicago. C'est marqué Chicago. Oui, oui. Ce qui prouve que c'est l'authentique avion américain. Oui. Ah oui. Un robinet. Oui. De l'huile, de l'essence, je ne sais pas.
Afterwards, the entire party made a preliminary trip to the crash site. With the memorial in the foreground, Kevin saw the spot where his grandfather's plane had crashed.
Voilà, l'endroit c'est où il y a la neige. À la limite,
oui, carrément. Donc il a été
où il y a la neige à la limite du terrain qui est pas
Later that day, the memorial was decorated in preparation for the ceremony. A color guard from the veterans group Souvenir Francais attended. Also in attendance were local civic leaders, representatives from the 922nd French Air Force detachment at Doullens, members of the National Police Service, Les Gendarmes, and about 50 people from the village of Arlington. A bugle called the assembly to attention. The mayor of Arlington, Georges Varembourg, his general counsel, and the wing commander from the French Air Force detachment, with the aid of a young helper, respectfully placed flowers at the base of the memorial. Kevin was then invited to join the officials during the playing of Last Post. After Kevin and the officials had thanked the color guard, the mayor of Arlington gave a speech.
Permettez-moi de vous souhaiter la bienvenue et de vous adresser mes remerciements les plus chaleureux pour votre participation à cette cérémonie commémorative. Il est essentiel de montrer que les Français n'oublient pas. Bienvenue à Monsieur Kevin Gellerman, petit-fils de Norman Gellerman, sergent aviateur mort sur notre sol lors du crash de son bombardier le 2 mars 1944 vers 23h30. Bienvenue aussi à ses amis spécialement venus d'Amérique pour l'accompagner. Le conseil municipal se joint à moi pour adresser mes remerciements à Monsieur le commandant de la base aérienne 922 et à son détachement, à Monsieur le conseiller général et à la gendarmerie, Monsieur le commandant de la gendarmerie de Doullens, aux représentants du souvenir français, aux porte-drapeaux, aux personnalités civiles et militaires. La pose de cette stèle, le 8 juin 1996, permet de laisser une trace au témoignage de reconnaissance du peuple français aux soldats américains morts sur notre terre. Dans la nuit du 2 mars 1944, un bombardier américain B-24 Liberator survole le Doullens, à basse altitude. À son bord, 8 hommes d'équipage, a pour mission de larguer du matériel pour la résistance dans l'Aisne. Il est touché par des obus de 20 mm tirés par la DCA allemande. Le bombardier prend feu. Le pilote McDonald a réussi avec sang-froid à poser son avion dans le champ juste en face de nous. Ce sang-froid a permis de sauver la vie de 7 membres d'équipage. Malheureusement, le sergent mécanicien Norman Gellerman fut écrasé sous l'avion au moment du choc, ayant voulu faciliter la sortie de ses camarades. Certains d'entre nous se souviennent très bien de ces faits. 6 membres d'équipage furent prisonniers. Le copilote a réussi à s'évader. Il est caché par la famille Ibon. Georges Ibon, ici présent, se souvient très bien. Le 8 juin 1996, en souvenir, M. Jean Macron, aujourd'hui maire honoraire, prit la décision avec le conseil municipal d'organiser une cérémonie le 2 mars de chaque année. Merci de votre attention et de votre présence.
Kevin then stepped forward to address the assembly.
It is with great honor
and deep emotion to find myself here at this crash site of the B-24 Liberator, where my grandfather died. My first thought, of course, is to the memory of my grandfather. But I'm also thinking about my grandfather's 7 comrades on board that plane who were delivering supplies to the French resistance on that day. In particular, my thoughts go out to the pilot, Lieutenant Frank McDonald, who has since passed away. He and his family came here from the United States in 1996 to dedicate this monument. I'm also remembering the 7 British Royal Air Force aviators who lost their lives just 100 meters from here when their Lancaster aircraft was shot down by German night fighters. I must extend my heartfelt gratitude for your invitation to participate in this ceremony 60 years after the tragic event. I also wish to thank in particular His Honor, the Mayor of hem-hardinval, the members of his municipal council, Dr. Jean-Pierre and his wife, Madame Jackie, Monsieur Jean Schmidt, and the people of this village who faithfully participate in this ceremony every year on March 2nd by laying flowers at the monument erected in memory of my grandfather. Thank you very much.
At the conclusion of Kevin's speech, one of his travel companions read its translation.
Chaque année, le 10 mars, un fleuissement de cette style à la mémoire de mon grand-père. Merci encore à tu.
Following the ceremony, all were invited to a reception at unravel's Civic Hall. Kevin had his photo taken with several people, including the mayor who was in office at the time the memorial was erected and first dedicated. Kevin learned that his grandfather had been ordered to go below to stop the fuel flow to the plane's burning engines. In doing so, the explosion was delayed, and in this way, Norman saved the lives of the rest of the crew. Kevin also met the man who found his grandfather's body. That evening, Kevin reflected on his experiences.
The people of the town of hem-hardinval were amazingly nice, and I felt quite honored about being there. And just being part of it was just very, very special.
On Thursday, Kevin boarded a train for Normandy, where he would pay a visit to his grandfather's grave. Normandy's picturesque landscape has been indelibly marked by what happened here during World War II. After a few hours of train travel, bus travel, and walking, Kevin arrived at the American Cemetery near colleville-sur-mer. Cemetery staff member Sylvie Jean led Kevin to the gravesite. The cemetery is the resting place for nearly 10,000 who perished in the war. Sylvie places sand in the engraved letters on the headstone. This makes the letters stand out for photography. After preparing the grave marker and taking a photograph, Sylvie returns to her office to prepare a next of kin portfolio for Kevin. Kevin remained for some time at the grave of his grandfather. On April 24, 2004, Kevin met with the extended Gellerman family to share the results of his research and give details of his trip. Kevin displayed many items for his family to see, articles from French newspapers that covered Kevin's visit, the next of kin portfolio prepared by Sylvie Jean, pieces of the aircraft unearthed by Jean Schmidt, and Norman Gellerman's army medals and other memorabilia.
It was important to me to assemble the rest of the Gellerman family to share the information that I had found.
Kevin gave an hour-long presentation about his voyage of discovery. The audience gave their full attention. All of them were learning things they hadn't known before.
I was so surprised that the memorial was dedicated to him.
Kevin cleared up the contradictions now, and there's closure there.
I learned a lot of information I never knew. I never knew any of this information.
He didn't want to send it over the mail, and I really wasn't comfortable.
Kevin's father took a special interest in his son's words.
Well, it answers a lot of questions. I mean, I never knew about my dad, and you know, very thankful that Kevin is doing all this research. I'm very proud of what he's doing. To find all of this information out from with Kevin and his research is just amazing. You know, like I say, I'm very proud of everything he is doing.
All of the Gellermans shared their appreciation for Kevin's work.
It's sad, but then there's a lot of people that lost during the war. There were a lot more that were killed. So there isn't much that I could say about it. It happened, and you have to go on living, right?
I think this has been a very positive experience. It has been a journey. It's been a learning process, and you know, not only learning about my grandfather and a little bit of who he was, but most importantly to find out the truth and how he died. But it's also made me learn a little bit about myself and you know, what type of person that I am.
Je t'aime, ma chère, ma chère.